I am Johnny Massacre and welcome to my world. Tonight, Brazil has frozen Elon Musk's Starlink bank accounts and appears to be on the verge of shutting down his X software. In Brazil, at least. Who is with me? Give me a hell yeah! So Judge Alexander de Moraes has blocked Starlink's accounts over X's lack of legal representation. What that means is X wouldn't censor people that Brazil wanted to censor, and therefore the judges in Brazil are trying to shut down Elon Musk's various businesses over there. So X isn't quite banned yet in Brazil, but it appears to be on the verge of being banned. X closed its operations in Brazil due to what was described as censorship orders and threats of arrest against its staff by government officials. Removing X's offices in Brazil was an action taken by X as a response to the situation rather than an outright ban by the Brazilian government, obviously knowing that it were highly likely X staff would be jailed without due process if they stayed in the country and continued operations over there. So with the banning of Starlink, Musk has called Brazil's Supreme Court Justice Moraes a criminal and denounced his actions as censorship. Reuters said this: Brazilian Supreme Court Judge Alexander de Moraes on Thursday blocked the financial accounts of billionaire Elon Musk's Starlink as an ongoing feud leaves social media platform X on the brink of being taken down in the country. Starlink confirmed it received an order from the judge that prevents the company from conducting financial transactions in Brazil and said in a post on X that it would address the order legally. Moraes' decision to sanction Starlink, the satellite broadband unit of Musk's SpaceX, is a response to the lack of legal representatives in Brazil for the X social network, a Supreme Court source told Reuters. At issue in the dispute is whether Moraes can order the social media platform to block certain accounts accused of spreading lies and distortions, a request Musk has denounced as censorship. Moraes on Wednesday night ordered Musk to name a legal representative for X, formerly known as Twitter, in Brazil within 24 hours or have the social media site face suspension in the country. And here is Starlink's response over on X. Starlink say, earlier this week, we received an order from Brazil's Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes that freezes Starlink's finances and prevents Starlink from conducting financial transactions in that country. They go on, this order is based on an unfounded determination that Starlink should be responsible for the fines levied unconstitutionally against X. It was issued in secret and without affording Starlink any of the due process of law guaranteed by the Constitution of Brazil. We intend to address the matter legally. So, what happened to everyone with a Starlink account in Brazil? Because there's about 250,000 of them. Starlink says today Starlink is connecting more than 250,000 customers in Brazil from the Amazon to Rio de Janeiro, including small businesses, schools and first responders, among many others. We are proud of the impact Starlink is making in communities across the country, and the Starlink team is doing everything possible to ensure their service is not interrupted. So, 250,000 people who paid for Starlink now cannot use Starlink in Brazil. And that is because Brazil and their judicial system have determined that Starlink is responsible for the fines levied against X. What it seems like is X won't censor people the Brazilian government tell them to censor, in the same way that Facebook censored what the Biden administration told them to censor, and therefore Brazil is trying to shut down any businesses associated with Elon Musk and X. Elon Musk says that schools and hospitals depend on Starlink, but that hasn't stopped Brazil shutting it down. Here is Elon Musk saying many remote schools and hospitals depend on SpaceX's Starlink. SpaceX will provide internet service to users in Brazil for free until this matter is resolved, as we cannot receive payment, but don't want to cut anyone off. So Elon Musk is now allowing people to have Starlink for free. Apparently also the military depends on Starlink in Brazil, according to Doge designer They say breaking. Brazil's army depends on Starlink for crucial operations like training, border connectivity, and long-distance communication. Alexander de Moraes is compromising the country's national security through his unconstitutional orders. And Starlink is now going to sue Brazil because of these actions. Doge Designer says, breaking. Starlink will take legal action against the unlawful suspension of its bank accounts by Alexander de Moraes. The order from Brazil's Supreme Court prohibits Starlink from conducting financial transactions in the country, which clearly violates the constitution of Brazil. So they've frozen Starlink's bank accounts, so they can't make money or send money or spend money over there in Brazil, but they can keep it running for now until Moraes' cronies are sent into the headquarters with a bunch of baseball bats and crowbars and wire cutters. And so Elon Musk is allowing people to have his service for free. Who is the bad guy here? Elon Musk, technological genius, providing the populace with the means to communicate and access information wherever they may be, or Alexander de Moraes, one of the members of Brazil's Supreme Court, who is trying to destroy X and Starlink because it won't censor people due to misinformation. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, here's a very interesting development in the story. X's Global Government Affairs account has given its side of the story, claiming they will release all of Moraes' illegal requests to censor people for wrongthink. And there are 25 million views on this X. Global Government Affairs for X says soon, we expect Judge Alexander de Moraes will order X to be shut down in Brazil simply because we would not comply with his illegal orders to censor his political opponents. Sound familiar? USA, I'm looking at you. These enemies include a duly elected senator and a 16-year-old girl, among others. When we attempted to defend ourselves in court, Judge de Moraes threatened our Brazilian legal representative with imprisonment. Even after she resigned, he froze all of her bank accounts. Our challenges against his manifestly illegal actions were either dismissed or ignored. Judge de Moraes' colleagues on the Supreme Court are either unwilling or unable to stand up to him. So Moraes is telling X they need a legal representative in the country, but at the same time, X is claiming that any of their representatives have been threatened with imprisonment. So you can see why X aren't putting a legal representative on their board in Brazil. The X account Global Government Affairs for X goes on. They say, we are absolutely not insisting that other countries have the same free speech laws as the United States. The fundamental issue at stake here is that Judge de Moraes demands we break Brazil's own laws. We simply will not do that. Very interesting. In the days to come, we will publish all of Judge de Moraes' illegal demands and all related court filings in the interest of transparency. Mark Zuckerberg coming out recently and saying he regrets doing the intelligence agency's bidding and censoring the Unterhey Eidenbay app top lay Ori stay. A little bit too late. X in real time publishing all of the government actions which could be seen as treasonous or illegal. God bless X. They go on. Unlike other social media and technology platforms, we will not comply in secret with illegal orders. To our users in Brazil and around the world, X remains committed to protecting your freedom of speech. So, Musk is now in a tit for tat with Alexander de Moraes, the guy on Brazil's Supreme Court and also on the Electoral Court, whose job it is to oversee elections and make sure they're free and fair. So Musk X'd this out. He said, de Moraes is a criminal wearing judge's robes like a Halloween costume. This is because Moraes looks a little bit like Nosferatu. Here's another X by Elon Musk that he released 17 hours ago. He said Grok generates an image as if Voldemort and a Sith Lord had a baby and he became a judge in Brazil. It's uncanny. So this is an actual costume being worn by Moraes. That is not an AI image there other than the lightsabers, which actually seems like a bad Photoshop, which is part of the joke. But he's actually wearing these clothes. Why do these people always look like the evil mofos that they reveal themselves to be in their actions? Can't you at least try to hide it, mate? This is the guy who's banned Starlink in Brazil and has frozen the productive company Starlink's bank accounts for not complying with his demands to censor free speech of political rivals. He actually looks just like that. It's pretty funny stuff. So some are now calling Brazil an actual dictatorship. Would you agree with that? Check this out. Michael Schellenberger, one of the best journalists in the world, who was tasked in part with covering the Twitter files bombshell story, says Brazil is now a dictatorship. It is run by two men, President Lula official and Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes, that guy who looks like Nosferatu. They today are ending both freedom of speech and free markets. Brazil is no longer safe for foreign investment, and its currency should reflect that. So the government are blocking financial resources from companies that won't do censorship for them. Okay, and Elon Musk responded to Schellenberger's X, and he just quite simply said, correct. So here is a history of Moraes, Supreme Court Justice of Brazil and member of their electoral court, and Elon Musk. But before we get to that, I am Johnny Massacre, and if you're just joining us, we're discussing Brazil shutting down Starlink and potentially X. But if you have been watching from the beginning, stop your grinning and drop your linen, donate some cash, and let's keep winning. Streamlabs.com/Johnny Massacre, patreon.com/Johnny Massacre, and paypal.me/give me a hell yeah. You know, I really appreciate your donations. Thank you everyone who donated yesterday, really appreciate you. And thank you John Gout for donating $100. I have not forgotten you. We're at $565.27, which represents 14.13% of the total bar, which is actually $4,000. If we can make that by October the 31st, I will fly to America to enjoy the election where we can see in God Emperor Donald Trump. So a little bit of a history between Brazil's Supreme Court Justice Moraes and Elon Musk for you. So Moraes, Alexander de Moraes, is a Brazilian jurist who currently serves as a justice on Brazil's Supreme Federal Court, and he also held the position of president of the Superior Electoral Court. That ended yesterday, so he's not the president of the Electoral Court, but he's still on the Electoral Court. So Supreme Court justices oversee the laws that are put through in the country, and the Electoral Court oversees elections. So Moraes' job is to interpret the Brazilian constitution, which includes deciding whether laws are legit or not. And his role in the Electoral Court involves overseeing the electoral process in Brazil, ensuring the integrity of elections and dealing with electoral disputes. As a Supreme Court justice, he has the authority to make decisions that can affect the entire nation, obviously, including rulings on constitutional matters, which are binding across Brazil. According to Grok, a majority vote is still necessary to do things like ban X in Brazil, which begs the question, how is this guy freezing the bank accounts of Starlink and on the cusp of ending X if it needs a vote to be pushed through? Moraes has sometimes acted with more immediate and unilateral power than usual, as in the case of freezing the Starlink bank accounts, especially in what he perceives as threats to electoral integrity or democracy. Where have you heard this before? It's a threat to democracy. Freeze their bank accounts. Canada, I'm looking at you. While the US Supreme Court justices typically act in concert, de Moraes has occasionally taken actions into his own hands that, while within his legal scope, highlight a more individualistic approach, particularly in emergency measures or during election periods. Why? It seems like during an election, if you make the other side look really, really bad, you can just censor everyone you don't like who says anything you disagree with, whether you're right or wrong. The good news is these kind of actions are still subject to appeals, reviews by other justices, and the possibility of impeachment. But we haven't seen any of that shit yet, and I won't hold my breath for it. Moraes is threatening to arrest ex-staff members, and he has frozen the bank accounts of Starlink. He has played a significant role in actions that could be interpreted as persecution of Bolsonaro, Lula's political rival, and his allies, depending on one's perspective, of course. Here's an overview of Moraes' actions. Moraes has initiated and overseen investigations into Bolsonaro and his supporters. Where have I heard this before? Biden administration, focusing on allegations of undermining democracy, spreading disinformation, and even coup attempts. Wow, it's like a pattern's emerging here. This involved ordering social media platforms to block accounts, including those associated with Bolsonaro's supporters, which some argue was aimed at suppressing Bolsonaro's influence. And involved investigating all of those perceived to be involved. Biden sending his administration after various social media companies to censor anyone who spouted the wrong narrative regarding COVID-19, election fraud, and things like that. Where have you heard this before? Brazil, same kind of thing, investigating political rival, just like they're investigating Donald Trump. There are patterns emerging, and the people who are conducting these investigations all seem to be left-wing, but I thought it was the right-wing who were going to do these bad things. Anyways, Moraes in Brazil has ordered the blocking of social media accounts and content which are a threat to democracy, and there have been legal actions directly against Bolsonaro, including investigations into his statements and actions. So censorship of social media and investigations of political rivals, these being carried out essentially through the Supreme Court and Electoral Court, respectively, in Brazil. Yes, Starlink's accounts have now been frozen. Does that sound like a free market to you? I'm not so sure about it myself. So I can think of 3 other examples in history where a government will freeze someone's bank accounts and kneecap and destroy companies. Number 1, Nazi Germany, 1933 to 1945. Example, after Adolf Hitler's rise to power, the Nazi regime employed various tactics to suppress political opposition, including the freezing of bank accounts of individuals and organizations deemed hostile. Yes, that really happened. This was part of a broader strategy to marginalize and silence political opponents, particularly those from left-wing parties. What about the Philippines under Ferdinand Marcos, 1965 to 1986? During Marcos's dictatorship, freezing bank accounts was a common tactic used against political rivals, activists, and dissidents. This was part of a broader strategy to maintain control and suppress dissent, often under the guise of combating communism or maintaining national security. Another example of governments freezing bank accounts was Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro, someone who's been in the news recently. In this case, the Maduro government has been accused of using financial coercion, including freezing the bank accounts, against political opponents. This tactic has been part of efforts to suppress opposition movements, often under the pretext of fighting corruption or foreign influence. Do you think Brazil is doing a similar thing to those 3 examples and trying to suppress their political rivals, or do you think they're doing it to help you, to help Brazilian people? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Things have changed rather rapidly in Brazil because only in 2022, Brazil was giving Elon Musk an award. Look at this. Mike Benz on X shows these 2 pictures, courtesy of Doge designer. So in 2022, Brazil awarded Elon Musk the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit for his contributions to the country. That's Bolsonaro awarding Elon Musk. And now his successor is blocking financial resources from Elon Musk's Starlink. I don't know, man. Like, the one on the left looks like a kind of harmonious, peaceful image, and the one on the right is all kind of chaotic and mad. Could it be that left-wingers being in charge in 2024 equals chaos and madness? Or are they just helping us? Are they protecting us from all the dangerous hate speech that, if we were to see it, it would be akin to looking into a Nietzschean abyss? And lest I remind you, if you look long enough into the abyss will look into you. We must be protected from that abyss by the government, the kind people, the clever people, the productive people, the people who made us what we are. We should entrust all dissemination and flow of information through them. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think we should be left alone to look at these things ourselves and make up our own minds? Or do you think the government should look at these things before we're allowed to look at them and decide whether we can see them or not? I'd like to hear your opinion about that. So this news about Brazil banning Starlink's accounts and freezing them and being on the cusp of banning X raises various questions, which I would like to ask you now. Do Brazilian people need to be protected from what others are saying online? Can we trust governments to restrict things that they deem are harmful for us? Even if there are things people are saying online that the government disagrees with, does that make their existence harmful? If there's people out online saying things about elections and questioning them, is that actually a harmful thing to allow it to be read online? Are humans unable to decide what is right or wrong and must outsource their decisions to politicians whose net worths don't reflect their actual salaries? Why are Germany, France, UK, Spain, Brazil, Canada, and the United States all at the same time pushing for similar laws and policies? Is that a coincidence? Are politicians influenced by lobbying? Are politicians influenced by huge speaking fees at events hosted by NGOs? Are politicians influenced by people buying their sons' paintings? I can't work it out. If governments ban overseas social media companies and make them comply with local laws, as is the case with Brazil, why do I in Japan have to comply with overseas American policy acted out by American social media companies such as YouTube in their censoring of certain information? This is my opinion. The government censoring free enterprise because the owners of these platforms won't say what the government compelled them to say is Orwellian and destructive to liberty. It destroys innovation. It destroys Starlink. It discourages innovation due to political risk. This destroys competitiveness. If you take away the leading people in the market, there's a lack of competition. People are less motivated to beat their rivals, meaning the consumer obviously loses out and doesn't get the best products and services. Markets allocate resources to where they are needed the most, meaning in Brazil, resources will be reallocated towards less innovative and less productive companies that do what the government tell them to do, basically censor everybody. As long as people in Brazil say Bolsonaro is Hitler, though, and companies say Bolsonaro is Hitler, that's okay, according to the Brazilian government. This will lead to lower living standards, less job opportunities, and less technological advancements. There will be more dependence on state, less freedom, more stagnation, and more uniformity. So color me surprised that the government, which is not a profit-driven entity, but a bureaucratic one, doesn't understand profit and productivity and has destroyed something profitable and productive. It's almost as if they shouldn't get involved and the people can handle themselves. The people can engage in the free market and make great things and make great companies and produce loads of stuff that will help society. People can read things online and make up their own minds about it. Are there really people out there that are happy that Brazil is freezing Elon Musk's bank accounts and censoring people? Are there people out there who actually, I know there will be loads of people because they just hate Musk, but are there people who really deep down are happy that Brazil are kind of censoring stuff online and think, do they think they can't handle the information and they just completely and complicitly trust the government to make up their minds for them about everything? I cannot believe that anyone cheering on Brazil censoring Elon Musk will think like that. If you are cheering on Brazil's censorship of Elon Musk, I can only conclude that you feel you should be able to see the information, but nobody else should, meaning that you think you're just better than everyone else, in which case, may I suggest you try to increase your humility somewhat. Because the other side could just as easily apply that tyrannical doctrine to you. It works both ways. And if you cheer on censorship, you can't suddenly cry for help when other people are trying to censor you. So I think it's a very dangerous game when you cheer on big government trying to censor people who are just engaging in the free market, giving you great technology and producing things that everyone can benefit from. The easiest answer, in my opinion, is just let the people speak. Let the people decide what is right or wrong. The consequences otherwise are far too severe, and those consequences are something that the United States of America is also potentially facing, what with the election coming up this November and the people who you might vote into power, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, being pro-censorship, pro-equity, aka communism, and things like that. So there you go, my friends. Brazil has frozen the bank accounts of Elon Musk's Starlink. It was done by Brazil Supreme Court Justice, and member of their electoral court, Alexander de Moraes, a guy who looks like Nosferatu. And Brazil are also on the verge, it appears, of banning X completely in the country. What do you think about that? Let me know what you think in the comments. I do read them all, and I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing your thoughts. So, big news today from Brazil. That is some crazy, crazy stuff, would you not say, brothers and sisters? We're coming at a slightly later time tonight, so some people get to watch today who don't usually get to watch. So, woo. All right, everyone.
Johnny Massacre says, hi. Keith UCBO Senior says, Johnny, greetings from the West Coast, California, USA. You're a boss.
You too.
David Ballager says, hey Johnny, good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend. Hope you enjoyed it. Much love, everyone. Take care, and I'll be back tomorrow. Cheers.